order to make clustering simpler. And then I'm going to present the Solaris portion of it, and then Makia will join me and do the latter portion. I've modified this notice of confidentiality just to give you the heads up that there is material in here that's forward-looking. However, this is not NDA material, so you'll be able to certainly get a copy of this handout. In fact, there's a number of pointers in here that you will probably want, so get you that afterwards. So I'm going to have a couple slides here that are repetitions of things you've seen yesterday. The point is, I'm talking about software, but I want to do it in the context of the bigger picture, which is to say, our focus is on that upper item there, on the overall vision. How do we make clustering easier? And when you take a look at the overall portfolio, we're not doing this in isolation. So the intent is that the software we're working on is done in conjunction with the rest of the portfolio in order to deliver overall solutions to you in the marketplace. It's a complete, stem to stern solution. However, what I'm going to be talking about is specifically the software. But you've already heard about the storage, building blocks. We have server building blocks. There are a number of hardware building blocks that enable you to go ahead and build the overall solution, whether it's a small one all the way up to large one. So that's what Sun is working towards, and the software is one component of that. So the idea is you get a bunch of crates, you open them up, the systems are pre-configured, you roll them out. With this way we're working the software right now, you would then insert your DVD and go from there to go ahead and burn the images onto those systems and bring them up. And obviously, you don't want to leave our service friends out, so we also have complete professional services and stem to stern services on the support side, as well as training available, both from us and our partners. So now I'm going to switch over to the software side of things. So looking at that portfolio slide, it's going to be covering those things in dark blue plus the two OSs right to the right of it. So the first thing I want to cover is what are the goals that we're trying to achieve with this software. So the first thing is we want to make clusters simple. We all know that deploying clusters is way too complex. Sun certainly has a lot of experience in that. Today most clusters when they go out, are just way too hard to build, and yet there's a lot of common practices, best practices that we've captured from those, and that's part of what we want to do with the software is encapsulate that, create the ability to roll these things out in a much more simple process. We also want to allow you to get them up and running quickly. And a core part of that, and I'm going to stress it on a number of the slides coming up, is we also want to get it up correctly. So it's not enough just to bring it up quickly, but a core part of what we're doing is adding in validation software along the process to make sure is the right set of hardware, is the right software components to enable you to make sure that as you bring this thing up, it doesn't just come up, it comes up correctly. And then we also want to make it manageable. So basically the management starts from the time you start probing those systems to go ahead and make sure that all the firmware is up to date, going ahead and doing all that provisioning, and then both managing and monitoring the systems once they come up. So the intent of our stack is to enable you to do all of that. We also want to integrate into your existing environment. So one is we have to integrate within multiple operating systems that you can get from Sun, whether that's Linux or Microsoft or Solaris. But we also want to make sure that in your existing environment, this isn't some alien body that gets inserted, but rather that it works correctly with all the rest of the stuff. So what you're going to see in the overall stack, you may not see it on the top level diagram, but be assured that it's there. It is the additional software to enable all this stuff to seamlessly integrate with the rest of the environment. And then a big focus throughout is on the open side of things, whether that's on open source, open platforms, open interfaces, industry standard commodities. And that last bullet, I'm going to emphasize again throughout, is the overall community. So we want to make sure that this is a community process. These are, you'll see the entire development process we're going through being done in the open. We want your feedback. I'm going to give you a number of pointers, as will Makia, to make sure that you have the opportunity to join in that discussion and give us guidance for where we should be going. So this is a view of the overall stack, starting from the bottom. We run on a variety of different hardware platforms, and then we have a variety of different operating systems that are part of the overall stack. And then we start working up into the various layers up there. Now you'll notice that currently, there's a number of specific Sun products called out. This is more for placeholders to give you an idea of the components there. The intent is, we want to make this something that's useful to you. So but you really want to use third-party software, we'll have the third-party software in there. Can't promise we'll have every third-party piece of software, but basically, what the community tells us to put in, are the components that are going to be in there. But the idea is to provide, a complete stack that enables you to get real work done. Now, one of the issues that we obviously have to address is we've got multiple operating systems in there. How do we get our stack to support all of that? And quite frankly, what you're going to see, we're going to show you slides of the two editions of the stack that are coming up in, within the next year. And you're going to see some discrepancies in there, particularly in areas like the management. Simply time to market said we can't get all that stuff quite sorted out yet. But the intent is that over time that we're going to try and merge those to the extent possible. That basically, we expect that you're going to have environments where you've got these different operating systems mixed. And you shouldn't have to use two completely different management paradigms as an example. So you're going to see some discrepancies, but note that we are planning to resolve that over time, and we do want to solicit your feedback on how should we do that process. So now I'm going to switch over to take a look at the Solaris and OpenSolaris editions. So the overall project, the team was kicked off in January. We created a project under the OpenSolaris.org structure in March. We've started creating a number of community activities, including wikis and mailing lists. A lot of that kicked off 2 months ago now. The original efforts for one of the threads is the supercomputing 07 developer kit that we handed out. But we focus on two areas on this portion of the stack. Part of it is the developer preview, which is focused on developers, and then there's also a portion that's focused on deployers, and I'll talk about each one of those in more depth. The goals of each one are listed here, and I think what you're going to find is they reflect back to those goals I talked about earlier, which is, for the deployer version, the idea is, you get a DVD or an ISO, and it basically enables you to basically, get the bare metal, get the firmware on there, provision it, bring it up, manage it, monitor it, submit jobs to it, all of those type of things, and validate it along the way. That's the overall idea. But again, want to emphasize the community portion of it. This right now is in definition phase. So if you've got strong views on this, you can either catch me here or join that community. The developer preview, and you're going to be able to pick up the DVDs right at the front here. I'll talk more in depth about what's on them. But the developer preview is focused on a developer, and the idea is to enable someone potentially on a laptop to create and deploy optimized HPC applications easier. It does allow you to go from the laptop to deploy into a cluster, so we've got some grid engine on there. But that's the focus of that particular thread. And again, it's community driven, and all the community portions exist today. So what is this community? So basically, it's hosted off of OpenSolaris.org, and I'll give you the pointers further down in the presentation. For the developer community, there was already an existing community which we co-opted, and then we've just started creating a deployer community. All the work, as I mentioned, is being done in the open, so all the source code we put there as we're working through the process. The deliverables may be binaries, but the intent is to basically share that code in the process with the community to give you as much feedback as you want to do. One of the things we're looking at is how do we support vertical communities. So for instance, if you're in financial services, I don't know, is anybody here on financial services? I'll use it as an example. There may be precursor libraries that you need in order to get your applications up. So one of the things we want to do with some potential specialized communities that we create is allow you to give us feedback for what are those things that you need to do to get those applications work. What can we do to basically enable you to easily get the applications running as part of this process? Because obviously if you bring up your cluster and the applications aren't there, it doesn't do you much good. But we've already formed the manufacturing one. That one's already was launched, I guess, a week ago, and we are working towards figuring out what should those things be and what kind of feedback should we get out of those. Now a bit more detail on the developer preview. So I've already mentioned, basically this is something that potentially can be deployed on a laptop. So for release 1, which is up there, and basically you can come up, pick up the copies afterwards, or you can come over to the booth and get copies. It basically is basically 3 pieces of software: some grid engine, cluster tools, and Studio, along with some integration and scripting to get it installed, and Studio plugins to make it easy to basically drop this onto an existing Solaris or OpenSolaris installation. So if you've got that running on your laptop, if you don't, you can go pick up one of the OpenSolaris DVDs right outside and load it on your laptop, as you're sitting through one of the sessions, and then load this on top of it. We're trying to make it easier to basically get this stuff up and running, to get some experience with it, and start working on the applications. Release 2, which is targeted towards the end of the year. The idea is we're going to give you more products and tools and give you tighter integration with the existing components. And again, we have communities. Please give us feedback on what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what would you like to see. The other version, as I mentioned, is the deployer version. The deployer version is designed to give you a complete HPC stack. So it will have an OS as part of it, either OpenSolaris or Solaris. It will consist of sort of 3 primary sets of components. One is a set of Sun HPC components, basically a bunch of binaries that there's things like Sun Grid Engine and Studio. It'll potentially consist of some vertical and general purpose ISV applications, and just what that actually means is feedback we'd like from you. How do we make it so that we can basically get that kind of stuff integrated on? Do we put it on the DVD? Probably not, but you tell us. We can create software depots, but we're trying to figure out what's the right way to give you as much of the software as possible. And then a variety of open source tools. And so there'll be both third-party and Sun components that go on this DVD. Release 1 doesn't yet have a date, so we're still working on, like I say, the definition of that, and the date will be coming out in the not too distant future. The primary focus of the first one is going to be on Sun HPC components, just because from a time to market, that's going to be the easiest thing to get. But again, we want your feedback on what should be on it, so we can make sure we get the right set of components. And this is a picture of a point in time of what we think is going to be on this particular DVD. Your mileage may vary in what actually gets delivered. Now, you'll notice that there's some color coding here. It probably doesn't show up too well for most of you, but some of this stuff is not going to be available in the first version. For instance, the luster component, PNFS, is not quite going to be there when we release. The intent is to include all that stuff over time. But this, again, it's just to give you a point in time thing. This is primarily focused on the Sun portions. Again, it's an integrable stack. The intent is we can have mix and match a variety of third-party components, but this is a point in time. And again, it's going to give you also a comparison to what is currently going to be delivered here shortly from the Linux side, so you can see where we are with that integration and give us feedback on what we should and shouldn't be doing. And my last slide is basically just a request that you join us in the community. So if you go down to the bottom of the slide, you'll see the 2 pointers. Here's the developer version, here's the stack version. Please do join those communities and provide us feedback on what you think. It's a complete waste of time. Is it useful? If it's useful, how do we help you with this? And give us that feedback. And with that, I will introduce Makia, and then I'll be back up for questions at the end.
Hopefully people can hear me. I think so. All right, so Makia, in all my glory. And I work on the Linux edition for the Sun HPC software. And so some of the project goals that we have. The idea is that up until now, Sun has been deploying clusters, deploying systems, Solaris-based, but the major of the market in the HPC realm right now is Linux. And so what we were trying to do is actually bring Sun into the Linux realm and actually put together a full, complete solution for how to bring a system online, an HPC system online. With that, we're trying to define what all the tools are, what's needed for managing the cluster, administrating it, monitoring it, those kinds of things. And we also want to be as scalable as possible, which it helps in the HPC systems. And so we'll talk more about the tools that we're including also, but we are looking for, we want to do verification, we want to do management, we want to do administration, we want to kind of solve all the problems. So about the project, we are, as Art has mentioned many times, we're also very open and community driven. We're trying to use the community as much as possible. We're looking for as much input as we can get on what it takes to actually build this, build the stack up. What tools are people using? What tools have I used in the past? What can we actually do to make this as big and useful as possible for anyone out there? We are trying to use community-style dissemination of information. We have mailing lists, which I'll give the pointer to later. We have, we're setting up wikis. We're doing various things to try to get as many people involved, and I'm always willing to go and talk to anybody that wants to play along as well. And then also, what we're trying to do is we're not trying to create our own OS. I don't want to be the next Red Hat. I don't want to be the next SUSE. I want to be tools on top of it. I want to be able to enable what people are using inside of their existing HPC systems and those kinds of things. And I want to just be able to layer tools on top of it. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to be as modular as possible. And you can just wipe out whatever the OS underneath it is. You can do CentOS, you can do RHEL, you can do whatever you want. And if we do it right, you just use our tools on top of it and you have yourself a cluster. And one of the major things that we're trying to do with that is this verification suite. What it's going to be is basically a framework of tests. And the idea is to also in the open, get as many people involved as possible to look at these tests. What does it take? There's two pieces to it. There's I just stood up a cluster. Does my cluster run? So here's a set of tests. I run it on the system. It checks the InfiniBand. It checks that the nodes are installed correctly. It checks all these things. And then also another piece of that would also be to test third-party packages. Does TotalView work on our cluster? Well, I certainly hope so. And our verification suite would be able to test that and tell us whether or not these third-party apps would work. So a little bit about our team. We are distributed across US, Canada, Japan, and China. It is interesting for meetings, but because you get to wake up at odd hours, but it works out. So that's kind of a list of the people that are on the team. We've got some people that have worked in Sun for a while, standing up systems. We took some people from Lustre, and so we've got some of that expertise and kernel expertise on that. System integrators, standing up as large systems as possible. We are working on getting an IB specialist and a quality engineer. We're kind of missing that at the moment, so if anybody knows anyone, I'm always open. And then we also have some interns that we're really focusing on letting them do the testing for us and teaching them how to run clusters and those kinds of things as our first pass to, if we can get them to stand up a cluster, hopefully we can get other people as well. So a little bit on our history. We were first announced at SCO7, and from that we began immediately pulling people together. First meeting was in January. We were still hiring some people during that time. We actually officially launched mid-February, and we've been running ever since. So our first preview release was internal. There's a number of internal Sun teams that were granted access to that mid-May, and we've been beta testing that as fast as we can. And 1.0 is coming now-ish. So here's the stack roadmap. I'll talk more about when it's available. So the overall roadmap, again, February was when we first started. We were looking at what happened at TAC. We were looking at some other deployments that were going on. And we were, CentOS 4.5, we were trying to just get a basis of what are people doing at that moment and where can we start, what tools were being used and those kinds of things. And we used that to kind of deploy our own internal cluster, trying to figure out what the tools were. We started moving to CentOS 5.1. Like I mentioned, the OS is modular. We use CentOS 5.1 because there are some people that are using it, but the main reason is it's functionally equivalent as RHEL 5, but you don't have to buy the Red Hat license. And my preference is to not have to buy a Red Hat license. I'd like something open and free, and that people can actually go and use without dealing with these added issues on top of it. And so that's really why we're focused on that. The beta version it starts off with CentOS 5.1, and we were using that to figure out what packages we needed to layer on top of it to really get our stack up and running. And we were doing a lot of testing as well. The 1.0 release, it's going to work out of the box as much as possible. It is a 1.0 release, and but there's always going to be things that we've missed, and that's where we're hoping that getting the community involved and telling us what we did wrong and how to fix it and those kinds of things. That's really what we need. And there will be a base verification suite, the piece of it to make sure that your cluster is running. Again, it's ever growing, and we want to get as many people involved in that, but we have a basic functionality. And the next release, it'll be fall sometime, and it'll of course have new stuff in it. So delving a little more deeper into the stack, again, the base distro there was some community input that we had for what we needed to start with, and that's why we chose CentOS 5.1. If you really so desire RHEL 5, because your environment supports RHEL 5, it shouldn't be too hard to functionally change that out. And so that's really what we're trying to do is get that modular portion. Again, more on the verification suite because we really love it and we want everybody to be working on it. Basically, the idea, again, what licenses there are certain pieces of the stack that require licenses. I don't want to deliver to you everything that would require a license because I don't want to handle the licenses for you. But I want to make sure that those things work on the stack. So what we do is we internally are testing as many of these different pieces as possible and making sure that they work. And that's really what this suite is going to be doing for us is when we deploy a cluster and we say it's Sun HPC and all this stuff, and we deploy it, we want to make sure that, when you guys say, oh, well, does this run on it? Well, yes, the verification suite told us that it ran. It may not solve all the bugs, but hopefully it'll at least give us the basic functionality. And we are delivering it as a complete solution. Basically, everything that it takes to take your bare metal into a full HPC cluster, Linux-based cluster. All the tools from, like managing firmware, managing power, console, those kinds of things. We want to get all those tools in there and make sure that we can really just bring your system up. Nice little stack diagram. Mine's a lot less complete than Art's. You'll also notice that in this diagram, we've been a lot more generic about certain things. Hardware. I don't really care what the hardware is underneath it. My stack should support the hardware. I should be able to load it on the system. I should be able to install the system. The Linux distro. Hopefully we can swap that out. Right now it's CentOS 5.1, but that should be swappable. OFED, I say OFED specifically because, well, I support the OFED community, and in the InfiniBand realm on Linux, there's not really too many options at the moment. On top of that, you get your standard file systems. Lustre, because it's Sun, and I'm part of Lustre. On top of that, you start looking a little bit more deep at the actual, what are we using for management? We're focused on OneSys right now. It's a tool out of Sandia that basically does diskless and disk full setups. Completely open source. It's got a good development community behind it. Really open-minded people as well. And so that gives us a really quick option to provision your cluster. And that's really its main focus. How does it boot nodes? How does it actually install nodes? And it can set up your diskless and disk full system pretty easily. Conman, PowerMan, these are two tools specifically for console and power management. They come out of Livermore. An interesting thing, they also are now ported to Solaris as well, so you can kind of get the same view on both sides of that for doing console power management. the resource scheduler. I didn't say anything specific there because every deployment has their own resource scheduler. Sure, we would prefer you use SunGrid Engine, but perhaps you are a Moab or Slurm shop or something like that. So we just need to make sure that you can swap those in and we'll be able to run them. OpenMPI and MVAPitch 2. Those are, industry standards for MPI right now. What we're doing is following the community. We're working also with the Sun Cluster Tools team to swap those out, and to swap out the OpenMPI with the Sun Cluster Tools as quick as we can, and start using that community within Sun for added support. Open source compilers, GCC, it happens to come with CentOS, so that was just a given. We are trying to support the ISV compilers, like the Intel compilers, the PGI compilers. Again, we're not supplying them. We're just making sure that they work with our system, and then applications on top of that.
So why is Sun Studio not there?
Sun Studio, we are working on that because there's a lack of support for CentOS at the moment, and so we're working on some of those tools.
Stay tuned.
Yes. In fact, Sun Studio is right there. So this is a nice, it's kind of an eye chart. If you can, I think the slides will also be available, so you can kind of dig deeper into it and look at what we have on here. This is just a list of the components that we actually are including in the system at the moment. The yellow is, of course, just telling you what each row is. Whatever color this is. This is basically what we focused on for beta, and really getting these core tools up and working, and then the rest of it is things that we're layering on top of that to better complete out 1.0. And so you'll also notice there are things that are bold and underlined. Those are actually the things that require licenses, things that that we say work with the stack, but we aren't specifically delivering with the stack. And all the underlined ones are also options to the stack, things that fill in those generic bubbles on the previous slide. There's my giraffe. So this is just a look at the boot screen to show that we actually did some work. And I just like the giraffe. So this is the kind of the breakdown of our 1.0 release. At the moment, is a build your own ISO type thing. What we will be doing is packaging up what we use internally to create the ISO and putting it out on a website. I don't have the pointer at the moment. That should be announced later. And what it is you download the tool, and it has the pieces in it to basically build your entire distro based on what I think you should have in your distro. So it'll go out to the CentOS repositories, and it'll grab the base RPMs from there. It'll go to our repository, which we are in the process of setting up, and it'll grab the management tools on top of that, and it'll package it all up into a nice ISO. You burn that to a DVD, you throw it in your computer, and suddenly you have a management node. And also, we will be including a documentation with that to show you how to take the next steps and build up the rest of your cluster. So yes, it has basically everything that's needed. And right now, on the same DVD, you have 2 optional components that you can, and that list will be growing as time goes on. Right now, you can choose whether or not you want Luster on there, or SunGrid Engine, and Sun Studio at some point, and cluster tools and everything else. As time goes on, that list will actually get longer and longer. Actually, before I go to that, another piece that I didn't put on the slide, we are also creating a Yum repository, basically. And just like all the other CentOS repositories and everything else out there, ours will have the tools that we seem to think are proper for an HPC cluster. So you can actually point to that repository, download whatever our management tools. You'll be able to download OneSys. You'll be able to just do a Yum install OneSys, and suddenly it shows up. And what we're doing is actually these core components from Sun and any other options that we're trying to do, we're actually going to be pushing those into this repository. So as cluster tools and everything else comes out, what we can do is actually, we could tell you, oh, you want to try cluster tools. Well, do we yum install cluster tools? And then suddenly it should install using our repository, and just kind of an added benefit of what we were trying to do. So this is just kind of a bubble diagram of what our overall components and where they kind of come from. You'll notice in the center the verification modules. These are the tests that we have right now that we're focused on trying to make sure that all the pieces work together. That bubble will fill up as time goes on. And what we're trying to do is just use these communities as much as possible to get into them, get involved in them, have conversations, and try to get the support. And so, speaking of support, so what we are is looking at a community-based support model. We will have a wiki site online. We have mailing lists that are starting to get used. We will have a Bugzilla up as well, so that to start tracking with some of the problems. And then it's basically we're looking at the same support that Lustre also has. So, and communication paths. So the first one is our mailing list. You can go to lustre.org and sign up for the email list. It's kind of low traffic right now. We've all been worried about being the first one to say something NDA on it, and I think we're getting over that. But it's starting to get used. We're putting out questions. We're asking people for input and those kinds of things on that list, and it's starting to get a little more use. The blog, it's kind of empty right now because I haven't had a chance to write anything, but we'll announce things on there, when releases are available and those kinds of things, and really kind of like just another way to get our information out there. That's all of my stuff.
Just to summarize the vision and also give you additional pointers to other stuff. At this point, we wanted to take, we got a few minutes for questions.
Yes, a few questions. But at first I'd like to really say that I appreciate this Linux initiative. I remember the last meeting in Reno, I asked some silly questions, and Philip, I don't know if he's here, I think he didn't really like my questions. But obviously there was some impetus there. So I really appreciate this. So question one is short, how about hardware counters in such a Linux distro? Second question, we have a similar initiative for teaching based on VMware. So having all the tools together with a VMware player, which is free now, is very nice for teaching. You just hand out the DVD and the guys can install it on their with a laptop, desktop at home, and in the classroom you have all the tools available immediately, which is really nice. And 3 is Sun Studio, yes. Teaching, parallelization, OpenMP, Sun Studio is perfect, and tasking will be there, and tasking is a big thing for teaching OpenMP right now. So 3 questions: counters, VMware, Sun Studio.
All right. For counters, we are including perf counter type stuff, and we've already prepackaged the kernel with that. We're also looking for what other people are using. That was kind of our initial swing at it, and just to include that. Let's see. The next one was on VMware. It's an interesting idea. I don't have that answer at the moment, but I'm actually willing to look into that. That actually I could see how to do it, and that would actually be kind of something cool. So I have no problems. I'll find me, and we can talk more about like what exactly you need in that. What was the third one?
Studio?
Oh, Sun Studio. Okay. So we are talking with the studio team, and I'm trying not to like show all of the pounding I've had like on everybody coming after me. I'm not including it right now. There are support issues at the moment. We're working through them. Those should be and we will be including it as quick as possible. And in fact, I could probably include it probably next week or something like that, but I'm not sure. So, you know, we are working on that support issue. So it's not out by, you know, any means. We can't include it at the moment.
So I believe we heard from the Sun Studio team that they're on board with CentOS support. So it's all in your court now.
Right. That's why I said maybe next week. So, you're right. I mean, it's been an interesting discussion. So, and there's a lot more tools like that we just need to get added as time goes on. So, that will be there. So.
So my question is, how much does your distribution depend on the OS version? So in general, we use SUSE, and is it more or less related to the current OS CentOS version you mentioned before?
Right. At this moment in time, just because of how fast we're moving, we haven't been able to do anything with SUSE at the moment. The tools that we've included, the specific tools that we're focusing on for the management portion, thinking about the list quickly, I can't see any reason why they won't work on SUSE. And you should be able to replace, you know, CentOS with SUSE underneath it. I haven't tested it, so, you know, I won't swear by that answer at the moment, but there's nothing that we've picked so far that is specific Red Hat or specific CentOS. Everything has been community, like open source, and tools that have been used on other pieces, and we just right now are focused on CentOS just for our timeline that we have at the moment. So I don't see a reason why we couldn't do SUSE.
Time for one more question.
You're so quiet over here. You going to share the question with me?
Yes. What about the MPI? We have seen that Stack, they have the problem. Every compiler needs a special MPI stack. Are there any plans on providing this in the repository?
So our repository right now actually, funny you should ask that question. So we have, like, for OpenMPI, for Mbappage, we actually have a version compiled for every compiler that we've seen so far. So we have a PGI version, we have an Intel version, we have a Sun Studio version up and up, and we have all these pieces, and they're available, and you should be able to point it at that and pull it out, and just go ahead and install those, and they should work. We've been testing that. So we are trying to include so that you don't have to build your own version for everything out there. We're trying to answer that question as well. So
can we deploy them in parallel and let the user choose?
Yes. One of the things that we're trying to focus on, and I kind of glossed over it because we don't quite have all the configuration done yet, but there's a package called modules, and we're including that, and we're trying to set up the configurations to be able to swap between your environments easily.
So I just had a bit of a follow-up question or comment. So I like the idea of being able to have a virtual image that students or others running Macintosh or Windows can do. But since those of us in the U.S. now are suffering from the high gas prices that you've had for many years over here in Europe, could you also maybe look at doing a virtual image for that other sort of free and open source desktop virtualization software? I think it's called VirtualBox.
I can look at that as well. It was a good plug.
And last but not least, remember that there are some DVDs up here of the developer preview.
Okay, thank you.